Please save me from my ex-boyfriend. He is trying to hurt me.
The night Damien Castellano hosted the most expensive charity gala in Manhattan, he was supposed to count his enemies. 22 of them sat in his ballroom, drinking his wine, smiling into his face. He counted them anyway. He always counted them. But sometime between the second course and the third, his eyes drifted to the empty space beneath the long banquet table, and he saw something no one else saw, a small, trembling hand pressed flat against the polished marble, fingers white from holding still. A maid was hiding under his dinner table, and in the doorway, smiling like a wolf in a tuxedo, stood the man she was hiding from. Damien did not know her. He did not know her name, her crime, her reason. He did not know yet, he could not have known yet, that in 9 minutes he was going to recognize the small white scar on the back of her hand. He did not know that the past 5 years of his life were about to rearrange themselves around a girl he had heard play piano exactly once, at his mother's funeral. He only knew, in that single second, looking at the smiling man in the doorway, one cold, simple thing. The man was not going to drink the next course of wine. That much, at least, had already been decided. 3 hours earlier, the Castellano estate on the Hudson had glowed like a pale gold cathedral. 240 guests in tailored black were filing across the polished marble of the foyer. There were senators with whiskey breath, old money widows dripping in diamonds older than the country, investment titans whose names appeared in Forbes and whose payrolls appeared in places Forbes was not allowed to look. They were laughing carefully, talking carefully, eating the imported caviar carefully, because the man hosting them was the kind of man who noticed everything. Damien Castellano stood near the grand staircase, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal tumbler of something amber he was not drinking. He was 34 years old and looked carved out of winter. Black hair brushed back, jaw shaved sharp, eyes the color of an iron blade left out in the rain. He had inherited the Castellano name at 26, after his father took 2 bullets walking out of a church, and his mother died 11 months later of what the doctors called grief, and what Damien called the bullets being slow. In the 8 years since, he had buried 4 traitors, married 0 women, smiled at cameras precisely when required, and built a legitimate empire so vast that the federal government had stopped pretending he was a problem and started pretending he was an asset. He was hated, he was admired. He was, above all things, alone, and he preferred it that way, because alone meant clean. Alone meant nothing left to lose. Alone meant no one would ever again sit across from him at a dinner table and then bleed out at his feet. In the kitchen, a young woman was washing her hands for the 7th time that hour. Her name, on the staffing roster, was Alina Vance. She had brown hair pulled into a tight low bun and brown eyes that were too dark for the rest of her face, the kind of eyes that did not match brown hair, the kind of eyes that suggested the brown hair came out of a box. She wore the standard Castellano staff uniform, a black knee-length dress, a starched white apron, sensible black flats. On her left ring finger she wore nothing, but there was a faint pale band of skin where something had been worn for a long time and recently removed. Her wrists were thin. Her hands were not. Her hands were a pianist's hands, with long, flexible fingers and a small white scar on the back of the left one, the kind you got from slamming a piano lid down too fast on yourself the day you found out the man you were going to marry had been lying to you about everything. Alina had been working at the Castellano estate for 6 weeks. She had needed a job. She had needed a job that paid in cash. She had needed a job that did not require a social security number that could be traced. The head housekeeper, a stern Sicilian woman named Mrs. Bianchi, had asked her exactly 2 questions. Could she keep her mouth shut? Could she follow orders? Alina had said yes to both, and Mrs. Bianchi had handed her an apron and said welcome to the most dangerous house in the city. The pay was generous. The rules were simple. Do not look the boss in the eyes. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not, under any circumstances, ask questions. Alina had broken all 3 rules already, not on purpose, just in small, secret, private ways that no one had noticed yet. She had looked at the boss once 3 weeks ago when he passed her in the gallery hall. He had been carrying a cup of coffee and reading something on his phone, and she had been polishing a console table, and for one moment as he passed she had looked up, and he had looked down, and his eyes had gone through her like cold water through a paper cup. He had not stopped. He had not spoken, but she had felt, for one full second, as if he had filed the shape of her face into some internal archive she would never be allowed to see. There was something else nobody knew. In the bottom drawer of her staff dorm dresser, beneath a pair of folded gray sweatpants, beneath a copy of Anna Karenina in Russian, there was a sealed brown envelope she had not yet had to use. The envelope had a twin. The twin sat in a steel deposit box in a brownstone on East 78th Street, in the apartment of an old woman named Madame Yelena Volkov, who had taught Aurelia Hartwell to play the piano from the age of 7. The envelopes contained, in copy and in original, 19 dated photographs of injuries, 2 notarized affidavits, the names of 3 Boston nurses, and a USB drive with 62 minutes of audio recordings. Aurelia had assembled them, alone in the dark in a Boston bathroom in the 6 weeks before she ran. She had told no one she was preparing them. She had told Madame Volkov, when she handed her the duplicate, "Only this, if I am ever found, give it to whoever found me." Madame Volkov had not asked who would find her. Madame Volkov had survived 2 regimes. She had simply nodded, locked the envelope in the deposit box, and pressed the small silver key into Aurelia's palm with one cold sentence. "We do not run forever. We run until we can stop." Elena Vance, who was not Elena Vance at all, dried her hands on a clean white towel, picked up a silver tray of champagne flutes, and pushed open the kitchen door into the gala. She had no idea, none whatsoever, that she had 90 seconds left of her old life. The ballroom was glittering. A string quartet played something low and Russian by the windows. Damien Castellano stood at the edge of the dance floor with 3 men he despised and 1 woman he tolerated, listening to a banker complain about a tax bill. He was not listening. He was watching the door. He was always watching the door. That was how he saw her come in, not consciously, not as a thought. Just as a flicker at the edge of his vision, a small black and white shape moving along the perimeter, carrying a tray of glass that caught the chandelier light. A maid. There were 19 of them on duty tonight. He should not have noticed any one of them in particular, but his eyes stopped on her and stayed for half a second longer than it should have. He could not have said why, something about the way she walked, too straight, too aware. She was not gliding the way trained service staff glide. She was scanning. Like prey, Damien took a slow sip of the drink he had not been drinking. The banker kept talking. Damien filed the maid's face away, the way he filed everything away, and let his eyes move on. He did not know yet that he had just begun the most important hour of his life. She felt him notice her. She did not know it was him. She just felt the temperature in the room shift 1 degree, the way a deer feels the wind change in a forest. She did not look up. She kept her tray steady. She moved toward the long banquet table at the far end of the ballroom where guests were beginning to be seated for the formal dinner. She set the tray on a small service table behind a column. She began to arrange the flutes. And then she heard a voice. A voice from the doorway behind her. A man's voice, smooth and easy and amused, saying something polite to the staff at the entrance and laughing afterward in a particular way. A laugh she knew. The world stopped. For 1 full second, Aurelia Hartwell was not in a ballroom in Manhattan. She was in a kitchen in Beacon Hill on a Tuesday in March, 22 months ago. She was making risotto. He had just come home. He had kissed her hair. He had said, "You smell like garlic, sweetheart," in the soft, dark voice he used when he was happy. He had poured himself a glass of the Barolo she had opened. He had complimented her dress. And then his eyes had landed on the open laptop on the kitchen island, where her email was up, where her piano teacher had written her about a recital she had not told him she was considering. And he had set the wine down. Very gently. He had walked behind her at the stove. He had slid his hand, slow, terribly slow, into her hair and gathered it and pulled her head back until she was looking up at the ceiling and could not see him. He had said, into her ear, in a voice softer than the voice he had used to compliment her dress, "Aurelia, sweetheart, are we going to have to talk about this?" And then he had let her go and kissed her temple and gone to take a shower and come back to dinner smiling and asked about her day and laughed at her jokes and brushed her hand under the table when their friends came over for the second course. And that night, when the friends had left, he had broken 3 of her ribs in the laundry room, very efficiently, with the side of his palm, in a way that would not show in any photograph. The whole memory took 3 seconds. When Aurelia came back to herself, she was still standing in the Castellano ballroom, holding a champagne flute by the stem, and Maxwell Crane's laugh was still rolling across the marble floor toward her like a wave that had been chasing her for 14 months and had just, finally, caught up. She did the only thing her body knew how to do when Maxwell Crane was within 10 feet of her. She dropped to her knees. She crawled under the long banquet table. She pressed herself against the central pedestal where no one would see her behind the floor-length white linen tablecloth, and she stopped breathing. She stopped breathing the way you stop breathing when a snake passes near you in tall grass and you have decided that holding still is the only prayer you have left. Above the table, the world kept moving. Champagne flutes were lifted. Cellos murmured. Conversations drifted. Maxwell Crane, 36, the son of Senator Bernard Crane of Massachusetts, walked into the ballroom with his hand in his pocket and a smile that had been on the cover of GQ, and the cover of an FBI memo nobody was allowed to read. He was tall, blonde, going slightly silver at the temples, with a small, charming dimple in his right cheek. He had the kind of face that made juries forgive him. He had been forgiven by exactly 4 juries. He kissed 2 women on the cheek, shook 3 hands, and let his eyes scan the room with surgical precision. He was looking for someone. He was very good at not looking like he was looking. He had been looking for 14 months. Damien Castellano, across the ballroom, watched him come in. Damien did not know Maxwell Crane personally, but he knew of him. Everyone in Damien's world knew of Bernard Crane's golden son. The senator was a man Damien could not bribe, could not threaten, could not buy. The senator was useful only in the way a gun cabinet is useful, locked, dangerous, and on certain nights, a tool. Damien noted that Maxwell had not been on the original guest list. He had been added at the last minute through Senator Crane's office, with no real explanation. Damien had approved the addition because refusing the senator over a son's social request would have been bad politics. Damien did not regret the decision yet. He would, in less than 10 minutes. Underneath the table, Aurelia pressed her cheek against the cold marble and counted her breaths the way she had taught herself to count them in the long bad year. 1 in, hold for 4, out for 6. The tablecloth brushed the floor. She could see nothing. She could only hear. She heard footsteps. She heard the rustle of an expensive suit. She heard her own pulse pounding in her temples like a fist on a door. And then, from somewhere terribly close, she heard Maxwell's voice. He had stopped at the very table she was hiding under. He had been seated there. Of course he had been seated there. He was the senator's son. The senator's son was always at the head of the secondary table, 2 seats from the host. Aurelia Hartwell was hiding directly beneath the chair he was about to sit in. He pulled the chair out. The legs scraped. She felt the air shift as he lowered himself into it, 6 inches above her head. His knees angled toward the table. The polished black leather of his shoe, she knew that shoe. She had seen that shoe in her nightmares for 14 months, came to rest 2 inches from her hand. She did not move. She did not breathe. She thought simply with terrible calm, this is how I die. Damien Castellano took his seat at the head of the long banquet table. The chair to his right was empty. It was supposed to belong to a Russian shipping magnate who had canceled at the last hour. The chair across from that one held Maxwell Crane. Damien glanced once at Maxwell, a polite half-smile, the kind he had been wearing since he was 9 years old at his father's dinner parties, and then he looked away. A waiter set a bowl of clear consommé in front of him. Damien picked up his spoon. He did not eat. He never ate at his own functions. He was watching the room, the doors, the staff. He let his gaze drop briefly to the table itself, the linen, the silver, the small lacquered place card with his initial pressed into wax. And then his eye caught it. A tiny movement. The white tablecloth, a small, almost invisible tremor along its edge, as if something small and warm were breathing beneath it. Damien did not move his head. He moved only his eyes. He looked down. He looked at the floor beneath his own feet. There, in the inch of dimness between the hem of the tablecloth and the marble, he saw a small pale hand. A woman's hand, pressed flat, white at the knuckles, trembling. He looked at that hand for what felt like a very long time and was actually about 3 seconds. He saw the small white scar on the back of it. He saw the bare ring finger with the pale band where a ring had been. He saw, also, the way the hand was angled toward Maxwell Crane's shoe. As if the hand were holding itself absolutely still in the presence of something unbearable. Damien Castellano, in that moment, did several things at once. None of them showed on his face. He understood without being told that there was a woman under his dinner table. He understood that she was hiding. He understood from the geometry of her hand and Maxwell's shoe that she was hiding from the senator's son. He understood from the tremor that she was very afraid. And he understood, from a place inside himself he had not visited in 8 years, that he had seen that small white scar somewhere before, and that he was about to do something extraordinarily stupid for a stranger he had never met. Damien picked up his napkin. He set it on his lap. He shifted his right foot, slowly, casually, beneath the table. He moved it inch by inch across the marble until the polished tip of his shoe came to rest with no pressure at all against the side of the small pale hand. A signal. The hand jerked once, violently at the contact, then went very still. For a long moment, 3 seconds, 4, it did not move at all. Aurelia, beneath the table, did not yet know whose shoe was touching her. She knew only that one man in the room had just decided he saw her. Her body did not yet know if seeing was the same as catching. Her body did not yet know if the second predator was going to be worse than the first. Then the shoe moved, just slightly, and pressed once very gently against the side of her hand and went still again. Not a grab, a held breath. A question. Aurelia, in the dark beneath the long white linen, closed her eyes. She moved her trembling fingers and pressed the side of her hand just slightly against the side of the shoe. An answer. "I hear you." Damien Castellano, at his own dinner table in front of his own enemies, smiled. It was the first real smile he had smiled in a long time, and no one in the room saw it because he hid it inside his wineglass. Then he set the glass down and turned lightly toward Maxwell Crane. "Senator's son," Damien said, in a voice that had killed 3 men. "Tell me about Boston." Maxwell Crane looked up from his consommé, surprised at the attention. He straightened, smiled, put on the charming face. "Boston," he laughed easily. "What about it? Not as glamorous as your city, Mr. Castellano." Damien's eyes did not leave Maxwell's. He had perfected over a decade the skill of holding a man's gaze in such a way that the man slowly began to feel that the temperature in the room was dropping. He was holding it now. "I heard," Damien said, "you had an engagement that ended badly." "Last year, some pianist." He spoke lightly, as if it were idle gossip, as if he had read it in a magazine. He had read it in 7 magazines and 3 police reports. A trained boss does not ask questions he does not know the answer to. He was watching Maxwell's face for the smallest flicker. He saw it. A tiny tightening around the eyes, a microsecond of cold. Then the smile restored and a small rueful shake of the head. "Aurelia," Maxwell said the name as if it were a sad memory. "Yes, we were engaged. She was," he searched for the word, "unstable, very talented, very fragile. She broke things off and disappeared. The family has been worried sick." He sighed. "I keep hoping she'll be found." Beneath the table, Aurelia's eyes squeezed shut at the word fragile. He had used that word. He had used that word to police officers, to nurses, to her own mother for 2 years until her own mother had died believing her daughter was a fragile girl who had walked into door frames. Damien held Maxwell's gaze. "And if she were found?" Maxwell met his eyes. The charming dimple appeared. The polite smile widened by a degree. "I'd take her home." Beneath the table, Damien felt the small hand against his shoe spasm once hard, like a creature trying to make itself smaller than it was. He did not look down. He kept his eyes on Maxwell. He let 4 full seconds of silence stretch. Then he raised his glass. "To finding what's lost," Damien said. The words were warm. The smile in his eyes was not. He drained his wine, stood up from his chair as if rising for a casual aside, and waved his Lieutenant Luca over from the wall. He spoke into Luca's ear. Luca nodded once, expressionless, and walked out. Then Damien sat back down and ate his consommé as if nothing in the world were unusual. 12 minutes later, Mrs. Bianchi entered the ballroom and crossed quietly to Maxwell Crane. She bent at his ear, apologized, and explained that there had unfortunately been an incident with Mr. Crane's car in the front courtyard, and his driver was requesting his presence. Maxwell frowned, set his napkin on the table, excused himself politely to the seatmates around him, and stood. The pale hand under the table did not move. Maxwell walked out of the ballroom with the easy grace of a man who had no idea that he had just been removed from the room by the most dangerous man in New York for the high crime of being in the same airspace as a Maid Damien Castellano had decided, 3 minutes after seeing her hand, that he would die before surrendering. The dinner concluded 43 minutes later. Speeches were made. A check for $2 million was passed to a children's charity. By midnight, the gala was over. By 12:45, the staff were clearing tables, polishing silver, dimming chandeliers. Maxwell Crane had been escorted off the property at 9:58 by Damien's men, with profuse apologies about his car, which had coincidentally, profoundly, suffered 4 flat tires, an electrical short, and a scratch across the hood spelling, very lightly in the paint, the single English word leave. Maxwell had not seen the word. He had been driven home in a Castellano courtesy car. He had thanked the driver politely. He had no idea, none whatsoever, that in the back of that courtesy car was a tiny tracking device that Damien Castellano had, by then, already begun watching on his phone. Aurelia Hartwell was still under the table at 12:46. She had not moved. She had not made a sound. She had been there, by then, for 5 hours and 14 minutes. She was shaking with adrenaline and fatigue and the deep cellular exhaustion of being prey for an entire evening. She heard the staff cleaning up. She heard chairs being lifted. She knew that any second, someone would lift the tablecloth and find her, and the question of what would happen to her after that was a question her mind refused to answer. And then, at 12:47, the hem of the tablecloth lifted. It did not lift the way a cleaning crew lifts. It lifted in one slow, steady motion, by a single hand, at the spot directly above her face. She looked up. Damien Castellano was kneeling on the marble at the head of his own banquet table. He had taken off his suit jacket. His white shirt was rolled to the elbows. His tie was loosened. His silver iron eyes were 3 inches from hers. He looked at her for a long moment, the way you look at something you have been searching for without knowing you were searching. Then he spoke very quietly in a voice she would never afterward forget. "He's gone," Damien said. "You can come out now." She did not move. She could not. Her body, after 5 hours, had simply forgotten how, worse than forgotten. Her body, after 14 months of being prey to one charming man, did not yet know if the second man kneeling in front of her was a different kind of thing or only a more expensive version of the same one. He saw this. He understood this. Without breaking eye contact, he reached his hand toward her under the table. Slowly, the way one might reach toward a wild animal. His palm was open. His fingers were steady. He waited. He did not say, "Trust me." He understood, watching her face, that those were the 2 worst words a man like him could have used. He simply waited. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She looked at his hand again. And then, with what felt like the last act of will she had left in her body, she lifted her trembling fingers and placed them in his. His hand closed around hers, warm and absolute and astonishingly gentle, and Aurelia Hartwell, who had been a Lena Vance for 14 months and a ghost for one entire evening, was pulled, very slowly, out from under Damien Castellano's dinner table and into the rest of her life. He led her out of the ballroom by the back service corridor. He told no one. Mrs. Bianchi, passing them in the hallway, took one look at the boss holding a maid's hand and turned around and walked the other way without a word, because she had worked for the Castellanos for 20 years, and she had been waiting 19 of them for him to look at a woman like that. He took her to his private study. It was a long oak-paneled room with a fireplace and a wall of books and a grand piano in the corner that no one was permitted to touch. He sat her on the leather couch. He did not let go of her hand until she sat, and even then he placed his other hand briefly on her shoulder, as if reassuring himself she would not vanish. Then he poured her a glass of water. He set it in her hand. He sat across from her in a leather wingback chair. He did not speak for 2 full minutes. He let her drink the water. He let her catch her breath. He let her shake. When she had stopped shaking enough to look up, he said very simply, "Tell me your name." She looked at him over the rim of the glass. Her brown eyes, which were not brown at all underneath, which were a strange dark gold that the box dye covered, looked into his iron-gray ones. She did not lie to him. She had lied to him for 6 weeks every day on her time card, on her ID badge, and even on the small placard above her bed in the staff dormitory. She did not lie to him now. Aurelia Hartwell. Her voice was rough. Her throat was raw from holding her breath. I was, she stopped. She put the glass down because her hand was shaking too hard to hold it. "I am sorry," she said. "I lied to your housekeeper." Damien did not smile. He nodded once, as if confirming something he already knew. He said, "Concert pianist, 24 years old, disappeared from a Boston engagement party in September of last year, leaving a fingerprint blood trail on a kitchen countertop and a missing prescription bottle of Klonopin. Senator Bernard Crane's office reported it as a mental health crisis." Maxwell Crane filed a private investigator search the next morning. 3 private investigators in 14 months. None of them found you. They were not very good. She stared at him. The room had gone very quiet. How? She whispered. How do you know that? He did not answer at once. He stood up. He walked slowly to the grand piano in the corner of the study. He did not play. He simply put his hand on the closed lid the way a man rests his hand on a coffin. I will tell you, he said, in the morning, you have not slept. You have been afraid for 14 months and afraid for 5 hours straight, and I am not going to put another weight on you tonight. Tonight you are going to eat something Mrs. Bianchi is already making. You are going to sleep in a room 3 doors from mine. There is a chair outside the door. I will sit in it. No one will pass it. In the morning, when you wake up in this room, I will tell you everything I know and everything I am, and you can decide what to do with it. Do you understand? She looked at him. Yes. Then stand up, he said gently, and come with me. The kitchen has soup. She stayed. Of course she stayed. She slept for 14 hours in the guest suite of the East Wing, in a bed 3 times larger than any she had ever slept in pajamas Mrs. Bianchi had laid out without comment, with a glass of water by the bed, and Damien Castellano sitting in a chair outside her door with a book he was not reading and a phone he was watching, and no one in this country was going to walk past him to get to her. She woke at 3 in the afternoon. She ate a tray of food Mrs. Bianchi brought her. She showered for 38 minutes. She put on the soft gray sweater and jeans someone had set out for her, in her exact size, which she did not ask about. She walked hesitantly to the door of the suite and opened it and found the chair in the hall empty but a small note on the seat. The handwriting was clean and angular. The note said simply, I am downstairs. The piano is open if you want it. No one will hear you but me, and there is something I owe you that I would like to give back. She stood in the hallway with the note in her hand for a long time. Then she walked downstairs. Study door was open. Damien was in the leather wingback chair, a coffee in his hand, the fire going. He stood when she came in. He always stood up when she came in. She had not been stood up for by a man in any way that mattered in years. He gestured to the couch. She sat. He sat. He set the coffee aside. He looked at her, and she saw for 1 second the boy he had been before he had been Damien Castellano. 5 years ago, he said. In May, my mother died, 11 months after my father. The doctors said her heart failed. That was a kindness. Her heart broke. There is a difference. She had asked in her will for one thing at her memorial, a private piano recital by a young woman she had heard play the previous winter at a benefit for the Met. A girl my mother said had hands that knew how to grieve. My mother had not met her. She had only heard her play once, and she had left that recital. She told me, feeling, for the first time in months, that she might survive losing my father. She did not, but she remembered the girl. So at her memorial in this house, in this room, the girl came. She was 21. She wore a black dress that did not quite fit her. She had not slept. I learned later, much later, that her own mother had died 3 weeks before. She came anyway because my mother had asked. Aurelia could not breathe. He kept going. I sat in this room, he said, and I listened to a stranger play a piece my mother had loved, and I did not cry because I have not cried since I was 9 years old. But I came as close as I have ever come. When she finished, she looked up from the piano. She looked at me. She did not say anything. She just looked at me, and she nodded the smallest nod like someone telling a soldier on a battlefield, you can keep going. And then she walked out. I never asked her name. I did not know I would need it. The next week I had my father's old enemies to bury, and I forgot to ask. I told myself I would find her at her next concert. I went. She was not playing. She had canceled. She canceled the next one, too. By the third, I understood she had stopped. I asked an associate to look for her. I was told she had become engaged. To a senator's son. I let it go. I had no right to her. I had only listened to her play once in this room, and she had given me back my mother for 1 hour. That was a debt I could carry. Then, 14 months ago, I read in a society column that her engagement had ended and that she was, quote, recovering privately. I did not believe it. I started looking again. I have been looking ever since. He paused. He looked at her. Last night, he said, while I was watching my own dinner table, I saw a hand under it. I saw a scar I had seen once before on the bench of that piano when a young woman set her left hand down before she played. I knew it was you before I had finished thinking about it. Aurelia could not speak. She had stopped breathing again. He took 2 steps toward her. He stopped because he was a man who knew when to stop. He did not reach for her. He said very softly, "Aurelia Hartwell, I am not going to hurt you. I am not going to send you back. I am not going to ask you for anything. You can stay in this house for as long as you need to stay. You can leave whenever you choose. I will not stop you. I will only make sure that wherever you go, the man you are running from cannot follow." Aurelia, whose name had been spoken aloud by a man who was not Maxwell Crane for the first time in 14 months, opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. "Why?" she said. The word came out broken. Damien Castellano looked at her. His silver iron eyes were no longer cold. They were tired. They were, perhaps, a little afraid. "Because," he said, "you played for my mother on the worst night of her life, and I have owed you for 5 years. And it turns out, as it happens, I had something to give back." She stayed 3 nights. He did not come to her room. He did not summon her to dinner. He left her notes. The notes were short. They said things like, "There is fresh coffee in the kitchen, and Mrs. Bianchi has stopped pretending you work for her. Please don't dust anything. And the library is yours. Take any book you want. Return any book you don't." She found him on the second day with a folder on the desk between them. He pushed it across. "3 options," he said. "New identity anywhere on Earth, or a legal team headed by a former federal prosecutor I trust who pursues Maxwell publicly, or you stay here, as my guest, with no expectations until you decide." She looked at the folder. She looked at him. "What do you want?" He paused. "I want you to be safe," he said. "And I want someday for you to play that piano again in a room that is full in front of people who paid to hear you because the world has been quieter since you stopped and I do not like it." "That isn't an answer," she said. "No," he met her eyes. "I will not say what I want from you, Aurelia, not for a long time, possibly not ever. I have not earned the right." She swallowed. "What if," she said, "I want you to earn the right?" Damien Castellano looked at her. Outside the window, a December wind moved across the Hudson, and in the corner the unplayed piano sat with its lid open like a held breath. "Then I will spend whatever time I have left," he said, earning it. She did not pick an option. She sat in the study every day. She read. She walked the long galleries. On the 4th morning she sat down at the grand piano alone and put her left hand on the keys, the one with the scar, and hit a single note. Middle C, the sound rolled through the room and through her chest, and she put her face in her hands and cried for the first time in 14 months. Damien stood in the doorway behind her. He saw her. He turned around, very quietly, and walked away down the hall. Because some things are sacred, and a man who has watched a stranger play, one good piece of music does not interrupt her when she is finally allowed to play again. The 4th morning, the storm broke. Aurelia was in the kitchen with Mrs. Bianchi, learning how to make a Sicilian pastry the housekeeper insisted no civilized woman should reach 25 without knowing, when Damien walked in. Aurelia knew, the second she saw his face, that something had gone wrong. He had a phone in one hand and a printout in the other. He did not speak in front of Mrs. Bianchi. He simply looked at Aurelia and tilted his head toward the hall. She wiped flour off her hands and followed him. He took her into the study. He closed the door. He did not sit. "Maxwell Crane filed a missing persons amendment in Boston yesterday afternoon," he said. "He has formally identified you as a vulnerable adult who fled a mental health crisis. He has obtained a court order, signed by a Massachusetts judge, declaring you in need of protective custody. The order is being argued as we speak to be enforceable in New York." Aurelia's stomach went to ice. "He's going to come for me. He's going to try." Damien set the printout on the desk. "There's more. My people have been watching him since the night of the gala. We did this because I wanted to know how he found you." He paused. "He didn't find you, not on his own." She waited. "There is a man in the Castellano house," Damien said, "who has been on Maxwell Crane's payroll since October, a junior accountant in our legitimate offices. He recognized you in the staff dormitory in your 2nd week. He has been telling Maxwell your shift schedule, your sleeping quarters, and the layout of the staff wing for a month and a half. Maxwell came to the gala to take you out of this house." She sat down on the arm of the leather chair. She had to. Her knees would not hold her. "But the accountant," she said slowly. "The accountant only knew Alina Vance. He didn't know my real name." Damien nodded. "I know." "Then how did Maxwell know I was Aurelia?" Damien did not answer. Simply held her gaze. She saw in his face that he already knew the answer. She saw that he was waiting out of mercy for her to come to it on her own. "Damien," she whispered. "Who else knew?" "Aurelia, sit down properly, please." She sat. He came around the desk. He sat in the chair across from her. He did not touch her. He set his phone on the small table between them, screen up, an audio file already loaded. 6 hours ago, he said, my people pulled the accountant's communications. He was being run by an intermediary. The intermediary was being run by a private number out of western Pennsylvania. We pulled the calls from the private number. There were 42 of them in the last 6 weeks, all to the same Boston cell phone. The Boston cell phone belongs to Maxwell Crane. The western Pennsylvania number is the landline of a small farmhouse in Beaver County. Aurelia, I need you to listen to 1 minute and 7 seconds of audio. It was recorded 8 days ago. It is the most recent of the calls. After you have heard it, you will know what has happened. I am sorry. I would have given anything to be wrong. He pressed play. The audio crackled. The room around her went very small. A woman's voice came out of the phone, warm, rushed, quiet. The voice Aurelia had been calling every 2 weeks from a burner phone for 14 months because it was the only voice in the world she still trusted. Maxwell, listen, I only have a minute. Tom's home in 20. She's in Manhattan. The Castellano estate, East Wing staff dorm. She uses the name Alina Vance. He doesn't know who she is, I'm sure of it. She said in her last call she sees him in halls, but he has never spoken to her. Go in cleanly, please, and Maxwell, promise me. You promised me last time. Promise me you won't, the voice broke. Promise me you won't hurt her. She is still my sister. Maxwell's voice replied, soft, charming, the voice from the kitchen in Beacon Hill. Vivienne, sweetheart. I never wanted to hurt her. I only wanted her home. You did the right thing. Tom will get the rest of the money on Friday. The audio cut. The room was silent. Aurelia did not move. She did not move for a very long time. Damien did not move either. He had set the phone down and folded his hands and was simply present, the way a man is present at a funeral. Aurelia opened her mouth. The first sound that came out was not a word. The second was, no. She shook her head. No, no. No, that is Vivienne would not. Vivienne hid me, Damien. Vivienne dyed my hair in her kitchen. She gave me the bus ticket. I know. His voice was very gentle. Tom has gambling debts, but she would not, Damien, she would not. Aurelia's voice broke. She stopped. She looked at the phone on the table as if it had bitten her. Play it again, she said. Aurelia. Play it again, Damien. He played it again. She listened with her hand pressed flat against her mouth. Halfway through, she began to cry, not the way a woman cries when she is sad, but the way a person cries when something foundational in the world has slid sideways and will not slide back. He let her cry. He did not move from his chair. He did not reach for her. He understood, the way he had understood last night under the table, that the worst thing he could do in this moment was touch her without permission. When the audio ended, Aurelia put her face in her hands and made a small, terrible sound that was not quite a word. It was the sound of the last person she trusted being subtracted from the world. After a long time, she lifted her face. Her eyes were red. Her voice was steady in the way that voices are only steady on the other side of something. Damien. Yes, he is going to come tonight. Yes, or tomorrow. Yes, before the New York court can stay the Boston order. She nodded. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up. He stood up with her automatically. Damien. Yes, she looked at him. The gold was beginning to come back through the brown in her eyes. I need you, she said, to do 2 things for me. Anything. Send a car to East 78th Street. There is an old woman named Madame Yelena Volkov. She has a sealed envelope in her name in a deposit box at the Chase branch on Madison and 71st. The key is in my room in the bottom of the dresser drawer taped under the lining. Tell her I sent you. Tell her, Aurelia's voice did not break. Tell her I have stopped running. Yes, the second thing, she paused. When he comes tonight, whoever opens the door, don't let your men take it, don't let your lawyers take it. I open the door. Aurelia, Damien. Her voice was quiet. I have spent 14 months running from this man because I thought I was a woman who had to run. I am going to spend the next 3 hours becoming a woman who does not. I need to open my own door tonight, or none of the rest of this matters. Damien Castellano looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded just once. You open the door, he said. I will be standing behind it, but you open it. The car came back from East 78th Street at 5:18 in the afternoon. Madame Volkov sent with the manila envelope a small folded note in Cyrillic. Aurelia read it once and refolded it and did not show Damien. The note said, Devotchka, you stopped running. Now you stand. The house is yours tonight. I am proud of you. The envelope sat unopened on the desk in the study. Aurelia did not open it. She knew exactly what was inside. She had been the one who put each item into it. She had been the one, alone in a Boston bathroom in the middle of the night, who had photographed the bruises on a timer with a date stamp. She had been the one who had slipped a small voice recorder into the pocket of her own coat for the last 6 weeks of her engagement, and turned it on every time when she heard the soft, dark voice coming home. She had been the one who had taken the affidavits from 2 nurses in Cambridge who had patched her up and asked, quietly, off the record, if there was anything they could do, and she had said, "Only this, write it down, sign it, give it to me." She had been preparing this packet for a year before she ran. It had simply taken her another 14 months to be ready to use it. At 7 o'clock, she changed clothes. Mrs. Bianchi had taken from a closet whose existence Aurelia had not known about a long, dark dress, plain, no jewelry. Aurelia put it on. She did not braid her hair. She left it down. The dye had nearly washed out. The dark gold of her real color was coming back at the roots. She looked, for the first time in 14 months, like Aurelia Hartwell. She came down the staircase carrying the envelope. Damien was waiting at the foot of it. He looked at her. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "If he sees you like this and is still standing, I will know I have underprepared." She smiled, briefly, the first smile he had seen on her since he had pulled her out from under the table. "He'll be standing," she said. "I'm the one who's going to sit him down." Maxwell Crane and his father's people came at 23 minutes after midnight. There were 7 of them. 3 were federal. 2 were Massachusetts state troopers loaned, off-book, to the senator. 2 were private security from a contractor that did not officially exist. They came up the long, white-graveled drive in 3 black SUVs, and they came with an enforcement order signed by a federal judge in Boston that was, technically, valid in the state of New York for approximately 7 hours, until a different federal judge in the Southern District, a man whose son had once been quietly extracted from a kidnapping in Belarus by a Castellano associate at no cost to the family, would, at 6 a.m., issue a competing emergency stay. Maxwell sat in the lead SUV, in a fresh suit, calm, with a single bouquet of white roses on the seat next to him, because he understood, even now, that the way to take Aurelia Hartwell home was to pretend, in front of as many witnesses as possible, that he was rescuing her. He was going to be very kind to her, he thought, on the drive back. Behind the front door of the Castellano estate, Aurelia stood in the foyer with the manila envelope in her hand. Her hair was down. Her dress was dark. Her left hand, the one with the small white scar, did not shake. Damien Castellano stood 3 feet behind her. Mrs. Bianchi held a tablet in the corner on which a live video stream was being broadcast to 7 outlets. Father Antonelli stood by the wall in his collar. 3 lawyers stood at the foot of the staircase. None of them spoke. The doorbell rang. Aurelia took one slow breath. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the brass. She opened it herself. Maxwell saw her. His face did 3 things in 3 seconds. Surprise, triumph, tenderness. He had been very good at the tenderness for a long time. "Aurelia." He let real-looking emotion onto his face, the famous dimple, the voice from the kitchen in Beacon Hill, the voice from the bathroom floor, the voice from the laundry room. "Sweetheart, God, sweetheart, I have been Maxwell." Her voice was clear. It cut him off. He blinked. "Step inside," she said. "Alone, your men stay on the stairs." Maxwell looked, for 1/10 of a second, at the federal officers behind him. The federal officers had received, 26 minutes ago on their personal phones, a series of photographs from a number they did not recognize, involving the private contractor company that did not officially exist and a Massachusetts senator who did. They had stopped speaking on the way up the drive. They were not going to die for Maxwell Crane. The lead officer, a man named Hayes, said mildly, "We'll wait in the car." Maxwell turned. "What?" "We'll wait in the car." Maxwell looked at him. Then at Aurelia, then back at Hayes. The smile slipped just a little. He stepped alone across the threshold of the Castellano estate. The door closed behind him. He saw the foyer, the cameras, the priest, the lawyers. He saw Damien standing 3 feet behind Aurelia with his hands at his sides. Maxwell's eyes went finally to Aurelia's face. "Aurelia." His voice softened, dropped, became the voice from the kitchen. "Sweetheart, whatever this is, whatever this man has told you, I'm here to take you home. Your sister is worried. Your family is Maxwell." She did not move. "I want to tell you 3 things. I am only going to say each of them one time. Listen carefully." He stopped. The smile was still on. The dimple was still working. But something behind his eyes, something that lived in there, the small, mean animal, had begun very quietly to look around for the exit. "First," Aurelia said, I have known about Vivienne for 9 hours. I heard the call. I heard her give you my address. I heard you promise her you wouldn't hurt me. I have already called her. I told her I forgive her, because she is my sister and her husband is a weak man, and a weak man with debts will sell anyone, and I am going to spend the rest of my life learning how to forgive that. Vivienne is not your card to play in this room, Maxwell. She is mine. Maxwell opened his mouth. She raised her left hand, the one with the scar, and he stopped. Second, she lifted the envelope. This is a copy. The original is in a sealed deposit box at a bank on Madison Avenue. The duplicates went out by courier this afternoon to the office of a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, the office of a federal prosecutor in Suffolk County, and the personal mailbox of your father at his Massachusetts residence. Inside this envelope are 19 dated, notarized photographs of injuries you put on me between September of 2 years ago and August of last year. Inside this envelope are 2 notarized affidavits from nurses at Cambridge Health who treated me in February and June of last year. Inside this envelope is a USB drive with 62 minutes of recordings I made with my own voice recorder in the last 6 weeks of our engagement. She paused. I want you to know something, Maxwell. I want this on the record. He didn't make me do this. She did not look at Damien. Her eyes did not leave Maxwell's. He didn't even know it existed until I told him at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I made this packet alone, in our bathroom in Beacon Hill, 15 months ago, on the floor where you broke my ribs. I have been carrying the only key on my person every day since. I want you to know, I want this room to know, I want the 7 outlets currently streaming this to know, that the woman who is ruining you tonight is not the man behind me. The woman who is ruining you tonight is the woman you put on the floor of that laundry room. She got back up, and she remembered to bring receipts. Maxwell's face had gone the color of paper. Aurelia, third. Her voice did not rise. I am not going home with you. Not tonight, not in 7 hours when your court order expires, not ever. You will never speak my name again. You will not write to me. You will not call my sister. You will not contact my mother's grave. If you do, the original of this envelope will become a press release, and the press release will become an indictment, and the indictment will become a number on a uniform, and you will spend the rest of your useful years explaining yourself to men who will not be charmed by your dimple. Do you understand me? Maxwell stared at her. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Damien spoke once behind her. Quiet, low. Mr. Crane. Maxwell looked at him. She asked you a question. Maxwell's voice, when it came, was a thread. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, I understand her. Aurelia nodded once. Apologize, she said. Once to me on camera for all of it. Do not perform, do not cry, just say the words. He did. The words were small. They were not enough. They were never going to be enough. They were also finally said aloud in front of 7 streaming outlets by a senator's son to a woman whose ribs had healed crooked. Aurelia looked at him for a long moment. She did not forgive him. She did not nod. She simply looked at him the way a person looks at a closed door knowing they are never going to open it again. Damien turned to Luca. Open the door, he said. The door opened. The 7 men outside were gone. Their 3 SUVs were idling at the gates. The federal officers had stopped engaging. Maxwell Crane, who had come up the white drive in a heated car with white roses, walked back down it on foot, in a thin suit in the December snow, alone while 7 outlets streamed it. He was 8 months from a federal indictment. He was 23 months from a conviction. He was 4 years from a cell in Allenwood. He would die there of natural causes at 51. He did not know any of this yet. He only knew, walking down the long white drive, that he was very cold. The door of the Castellano estate closed behind him. Aurelia Hartwell stood in the marble foyer with the envelope still in her hand. She looked down at it. She looked at her left hand. The scar was visible against her wrist. Her hand was not shaking. It had not shaken once. She turned around. Damien Castellano was looking at her the way a man looks at a thing he has just seen for the first time, even though he has been watching it for weeks. She held out the envelope to him. Hold this for me, she said. I don't want to carry it anymore. He took it. He took it like it was made of glass. The household around her dispersed quietly. The lawyers folded their tablets. Mrs. Bianchi turned off the streams. Father Antonelli kissed her forehead and went to bed. Luca and his men went back to their posts. The long marble foyer in the end held 2 people, Damien Castellano holding an envelope, and Aurelia in front of him. He set the envelope down on the small console table. He looked at her. Aurelia. She waited. I have done a lot of things in my life, he said quietly, in this house. I have buried 4 men. I have signed papers. I have bought judges. I have refused, on average, to be moved by anything. I have just watched you stand in my own foyer and tell a senator's son that he was ruined by the woman he put on a laundry room floor. I am not going to recover from that any time soon. I want you to know that. I want you to know that for the rest of my life, when somebody asks me what I have seen in this house, the first thing I am going to tell them about is tonight. She looked at him, her eyes finally filled. Damien. Yes. She tried to say something. The syntax broke. I don't know who I am. After this, I have been a woman who is hiding for 14 months. I have been a woman who is hurt for 2 years before that. She stopped. He waited. I don't know if I can love anyone, Damien. He smiled very slightly. Aurelia, she waited. I have not asked you to, she blinked. I am asking you something else. What? I am asking you, he said, to play, not for me, not for my mother, not for anyone. I am asking you to play in the morning when you wake up, and in the afternoon when the light gets long, and in the evening when the house is quiet, and at midnight if you cannot sleep. I am asking you to play every day for as long as you choose to live in this house. I am not asking you to choose me. I am asking you to choose the piano. Because the woman who plays the piano is the woman you remember being, and I would like, very much, for that woman to come back, whether or not she ever decides she wants to look at me. He paused. If, somewhere in the months between now and the end of my life, the woman who plays the piano decides on some evening on her own, with no asking from me that she would also like to take a walk with me down the long drive in the snow, I will be available. But that is not the deal. The deal is the piano. The deal is the woman. The deal is you. Aurelia looked at him. The fire in the next room had been rebuilt by Mrs. Bianchi while no one was watching. It cast a long red light across the marble. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 3. Damien, she whispered. He waited. Walk with me, she said. Not now, in a week or a month. When the snow is right. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He nodded. When the snow is right, he said. He stood. He offered her his hand. She took it. He helped her toward the stairs. He did not pull her toward him. He did not kiss her. He turned and he walked her slowly, the way one walks a guest, down the long marble hallway to the foot of the great oak staircase, and stopped exactly there where the rules of his house and the rules of his honor required him to stop. Good night, Aurelia, he said. Good night, Damien, she said. She walked up the stairs alone. He watched until she had disappeared down the upper hall. Then he turned and he walked slowly back down the long marble corridor to his study, where the piano was still open, where she had played for an hour earlier that evening, and he sat down on the couch by the dying fire, and he put his face in his hands, and he allowed himself, for the first time since he was 9 years old, to cry. Mrs. Bianchi found him there at 4. She did not say anything. She set down a glass of water beside him. She placed one weathered hand briefly on his shoulder. She walked out. She closed the door behind her. The walk happened on the 11th of February. The snow was right. It had fallen for 2 days, soft and slow, and it lay across the grounds of the Castellano estate in a long, unbroken sheet. They went out at sunset, in heavy coats, gloves on, no scarves, because Aurelia had wanted to feel the cold on her throat. They walked down the long white drive that Maxwell Crane had walked down 2 months earlier. They did not speak for the first 10 minutes. They did not need to. By February, they had spent enough hours in the same rooms together, not speaking, that silence between them was not silence anymore. It was a third presence. It walked with them. At the gates, Damien stopped. He did not open them. He turned to her. The setting sun was on her face. Her hair was now all the way back to gold. She had gained 6 pounds. She had the previous Tuesday been offered a recital in March at a small hall in Midtown and had accepted. Music she was writing, she had begun writing again on Christmas Eve by accident while Damien read across the room, was unlike anything she had written before her engagement, and was, she suspected, the best work she had ever done. Damien, she said. He waited. I don't know yet, she said, what I feel. I want you to know that. I don't want to lie to you even by accident. I do not know yet what I feel. He nodded. He did not speak. But I know, she said, what I want. He waited. I want to walk down this drive with you again next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. I want in a year to look back on 100 walks. I want to keep walking. She looked at him. Is that enough for you? He looked at her. The setting sun was on his face too. The iron-gray eyes were not iron anymore. They had not been iron in some time. Aurelia Hartwell, Damien Castellano said very quietly. "It is more than I have ever in my life been given." She nodded. She took off one glove. She offered him her hand, the left one, the one with the small white scar he had recognized from across his banquet table on the night that had begun their lives. He took it bare in his bare hand. He did not kiss it. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her hand against his own in the cold February air, while the sun went down over the Hudson, and the snow lay unbroken on the long white drive, and a woman who had spent 2 years being hurt and 14 months hiding stood at the gates of an estate she had once dusted, holding the hand of a man who had pulled her, 3 months earlier, out from under his own dinner table. They turned around. They walked back up the drive together slowly. She played for him that night. She played for an hour. He sat in the wingback chair with his head back and his eyes closed and listened. When she finished, she did not look up. There was nothing to tell him this time. This time he already knew. There is a photograph that exists in the private collection of Mrs. Bianchi, who passed away peacefully at the age of 81 in the spring of 2031. The photograph is of a wedding. It was taken, very quietly, on a Sunday morning in October, 2 years and 10 months after a charity gala in Manhattan, in a small private chapel on the grounds of an estate on the Hudson. There were 11 guests. Father Antonelli officiated. The bride wore a simple ivory dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings and no veil. Her hair was long and gold, and she was carrying a small bouquet of white winter roses, because a man named Maxwell Crane had once carried white roses up that drive on a December night, and the bride had decided, very calmly, that she was going to take the roses back. The groom wore a black suit and looked in the photograph like a man who had spent the morning learning, again and again, how to breathe. When the priest pronounced them married, the bride turned to the groom. She did not kiss him for several seconds. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said very softly words that no microphone caught but which Mrs. Bianchi would later swear on the grave of her own mother were these. "I have decided what I feel." He looked at her. She smiled, the smallest, gentlest smile. "I love you, Damien." He closed his eyes. He opened them. He kissed her. It was not the kiss of a boss and a guest. It was not the kiss of a rescuer and the rescued. It was the kiss of a man who had, 8 years earlier, listened to a stranger play piano at his mother's funeral, and had spent every day since trying, in his own broken way, to deserve being loved by her. The chapel bells rang. The guests stood. Outside, on the long white drive, the autumn leaves came down in a slow red rain. And in the corner of the chapel, where a small spinet piano had been set up that morning at the bride's request, an old woman in black sat down and played, very softly, with her old hands, the first 8 bars of a piece a girl named Aurelia had once played, 8 years before, in another room in the same house, on the worst night of an old woman's son's life. She had been listening at the door. She had remembered every note. She played them back to him now, on his wedding day, as a gift. Damien Castellano, holding his wife by both hands at the front of the chapel, heard the notes. He did not turn his head. He did not need to. He simply closed his eyes and held on to Aurelia and listened to the only piece of music he had ever loved, played twice in his life, 8 years apart in the same house, by the same hands, but for entirely different reasons. The last note hung in the still air of the chapel and would not let go. Aurelia tightened her right hand inside his. He felt against his palm the small white scar on the back of her left one, the scar he had recognized from across a banquet table in a room that no longer existed in either of their lives. A single red leaf came in through the open chapel door and landed, soundless, on the marble at their feet. Damien Castellano opened his eyes. He looked at her. He smiled. He did not say anything. He did not need to. He had been a man for 8 years who counted his enemies. He stood there now, in a small chapel on a Sunday morning, with a gold-haired woman's hand in his, and counted instead, for the first time in his adult life, what he had been given.